So thank you, the 650 people, I believe, that are here for the very first time is very impressive. You should thank all of yourselves. How many people flew from somewhere other than here? Wow. Very good. So I was in Greece in September for Agile Greece, and they have been creating a similar community, and I think maybe there was their fourth year and they had 600 people. So this is your first year. Muy grande. So bravo. So I could probably talk all day. You'll have to, well, this nice young lady will stop me. But I want to go over what Agile means to me, how I approach it, try to give you a background where it came from in my mind, and give you some of my tips. So it's often difficult to tell your mother what you do for a living, because software is very strange. But in short, I like to say we provide client-valued features, something someone's going to pay for. Another way to think about it is my most joy comes from putting smiles on our clients' faces. So the question that you need to ask is Scrum the only thing you need to do to be Agile? Like if you just do Scrum, does that make you Agile? And it's a common problem where when you're new to something, I don't know why in the software world we like Japanese martial arts phrases, but there's the phrase called shu, ha, and ri. Shu means you're apprenticing, you're working under a master, you're learning, you're reading a book, you're doing a tutorial, you're following a process by you're cooking a meal, following the recipe. So you do that in the beginning until you become adept at the flavors of the meal, for example, you might change. So Scrum is a good place to start. Doing something by rote process is a good place to start. It's a bad place to stay. So one of the things you need to recognize is that, in my mind, Agile is a mindset. It never changes. You can't just stop thinking. I still feel inadequate and incompetent every day. It doesn't get any easier. So I want you to really embrace this is a journey. It's not a destination. So I do yoga. Oddly enough, I'm not very flexible, but I do yoga. So I kind of think of a few things in a more holistic way. And to me, as an engineer, the system is really what's important. There are a great many things we do that individually might not mean much, but as a whole are critical. And that's what I want to try to get across, is it's more of a state of mind. You don't do Agile, you are Agile. Oftentimes, I'm asked, what does Agile mean? And I've tried to put it into one sentence. And it really has to do with reducing the gap in time between doing something and getting a feedback. So, for example, doing requirements for a year doesn't sound too good. You don't get a lot of feedback. So that's I think you can almost reduce most of what we try to strive to do as Agile as reducing the gap in time between taking action and getting feedback. That's critical. So I want to give you It's amazing to think that the Agile Manifesto will be coming up on a 20-year anniversary soon. That makes me only 40. But luckily, I have some historical books I read about old stuff that we used to do before Agile. And I think there are so many young people, there are so many people new to Agile, you don't even have I don't think it translates, but the foggiest idea. In other words, when the fog's out there, you don't see much. The foggiest idea of what it used to be like. Some of you might, but most of you don't. So, technically, I am not a software guy. I picked up software as part of doing aerospace engineering. First cruise missile testing, then flight simulation. Anybody here ever see Top Gun, the movie? Awesome movie. Oh yeah. Well, the flat spin that killed Goose. We did a lot of work to actually put pilots through flat spin training on a centrifuge called -6 Gs. So Gs are normally like this, like you pull Gs like on a roller coaster. You feel them this way. 6 Gs eyeballs out because there you are a ball on the end of a 7-meter string, and 6 times the force of gravity, your eyes would bleed. So that's where I got my start doing flight simulation software, working on real time. So when people tell me about real time, well, I know about real time from actually having to run a system and multiple visuals, the actual control of the centrifuge, the aerodynamic model, software, etc. So that really led me into the software world deeply. So I use it as a tool, not an end. So engineers solve problems. Scientists invent new things, but engineers put man on the moon. So I'm kind of biased towards software engineering. And then, now I'm a chief coffee maker. So I spent my first half of my career doing a lot of engineering R&D. I did a lot of work in consulting. I've been to hundreds of companies and built tools, modeling tools. So I'm kind of need tools to help me do software better and faster and cheaper. And I've loved doing web development now. So I've gone through all kinds of languages that have taught me a lot. I've gone through all kinds of weird frameworks some of you may or may not recognize. So I kind of highlight, I love Ruby, I love Rails. If I never have to do another SQL database, I won't cry. I love Mongo. I first learned about version control from a strange thing called RCS, but I love Git. And the ability, it's amazing, I can deploy things myself now. So all these things that are here today are light years from when I started. It's unthinkable that 20 years ago, that I could somehow go on the cloud and stand up an application and it would run for years without a bunch of people. So in my mind, there's no excuse to not be doing things as efficiently, effectively, dare I say perfectly as possible, because you can. What's out there today is light years. So from an architect's point of view, I'm, again, shaped by my engineering background, shaped by being able to break things down into components and modules, etc. I never understood data flow diagrams. I did do some software graduate work. They always confused me. Structured programming always confused me until I got to OO. Then that was nirvana. But yet, never realized the nirvana. So I've gone through a crazy, and I'll make these slides available. I see people taking pictures, but I'll make them available faster than Sebastian, maybe. Where's Velasquez? No. But then comes the world of project management. I remember being an idiot and trying to use like a Gantt chart for software. Did that about once or twice, because that's the only project management I knew from an engineering point of view, which worked great for projects that are normal, but it worked like crap for software. So up comes a bunch of new practices. Who's heard of XP? Hopefully everybody. If not, Google it. Feature-driven development is a little more deeper, and that's actually where I spent a lot of time. And then, of course, the Agile Gathering was some brand new way to consider things, and I learned about Scrum. That's the first time I learned about Scrum, was as we gathered, we kind of described our methods to each other just to get a frame of reference. And I was like, oh, Scrum. It's probably in my notes that Ryan shared. But I probably, one of the things I do is I'll pigeonhole things. I'll hear something and then maybe I'll stereotype it, pigeonhole it. But I pigeonhole that, it looks like a meta wrapper for doing projects of anything. And I know Fabian and some of his folks using it for oil and gas industry to help with drilling efficiencies and other strange things, right? So Scrum really is a framework around which you can manage building something at home even. So oddly enough, I was 20 years into my career when this happened. Some of you are just starting your career and it's already happened. So I didn't think about this until I think Fabian mentioned it at a dinner, that there are people who, just like cell phones, there are folks who have not known not having a cell phone, as crazy as that is. So this thing came out miraculously. And does anyone know what F equals MA is? Anybody remember physics? I'm not saying that the Agile Manifesto is as grounded as physics, but yeah, it's Newton's second law or something like that. I just put that up there because Davi, wherever he is, was asking, and others have asked, would you add to it? Would you extend it? Would you change it? Would you do it again? And I'm like, no. And I say that because I believe these 4 bullets get to the essence of human behavior as pertains to software. And that's not going to change. So I'll explain some of I worked a lot on Defense Department, government contracting. And I know that was talked about. I think some questions were asked in Richard's talk. The hard part about, especially I was doing R&D, so research and development, I don't know, might have some feedback loops. So it was kind of silly to think that someone could put out a request for proposal, perfectly describe what they want, we estimate the job, win the job, and we do it without thinking. So that was my introduction to, this is stupid, this is a heavyweight process, this is a waste of taxpayers' money. What's better is to have good interaction with your customer, have the ability to change as you got feedback. Basically, work within the confines of the proposal, but not like lockstep or not foolishly without thinking. So much of this comes from, you can imagine, I didn't want to get into a pissing match, that's not good, into a squabble, a small fight over contracts. Rather work with the customer. So all of these things were very important to me as coming from doing software in a heavyweight world, extending my own lightweight processes to that and trying to get all of these outcomes. We favored all of the ones on the left. And it's really important that you also know, that doesn't say no documentation, right? It doesn't say no contracts or don't follow the plan. It's not black and white. It's purposefully gray. And that's also really important to know. So my holistic view has to do with, again, my engineering background. It's more systems thinking, breaking things into modules, components, understanding, and this is true of probably any kind of system, but the fewer the interdependencies, or at least the more narrow they are, the easier it is to have things flow. And one of the hard things about engineering is you're always balancing. Aerospace is a classic. There was a funny diagram in one of my books, aerospace books, that shows airplanes designed from different perspectives in the aerospace world. So somebody who cares deeply about structural strength, the airplane looks like a building with an I-beam, very, horrible looking. Someone who's interested in propulsion, the airplane is just a giant engine. Someone who's interested in the aerodynamics, looks like a needle, almost no drag. And what we have to do, and that's something that I approach all projects with, is really trying to understand the system, what are the competing forces, try to balance the risk. And that's a real key. It's not just some lockstep process. I'm not going to go over this much, but sometimes if I had to put all the kinds of things I do in total on many different projects, it might kind of sort of look like this. But everything is different because, here I'm showing releases, but a lot of times after the first release, I don't have releases. I just constantly delivering. But that doesn't work in all industries. Who here works in an industry that it has much more rigid requirements on having to deliver in more of a pre-planned way because of all sorts of other reasons other than the software? I remember looking at some organizations can't handle rapid releases because they think they have to train the users, they have to do maybe documentation. So even here, it's not a consistent way. You must always think about your circumstances. So the way I work is I gather just enough requirements, and you can see that's a simple sticky board. The next thing I try to distill from that is, can we distill from the requirements and the business requests some kind of a vision? Can we plant a flag in the distance? And this was just when I was a young teenager. I set my eyes on the famous Swiss mountain, the Matterhorn. Took me till I was 50 before I climbed it, but still, that was a metaphor for, I do that with every project, is set a vision, set a goal, make sure everybody understands it. Sometimes you can turn the requirements into a single simple message. Then I often I'm a nut about building domain models. Domain models represent the business. They represent the language that we're going to speak. Maybe it was Luis who mentioned this is an empathy towards the customer, in that I care deeply about their business problem. That's my number one goal, is to learn the business. And I'd say that for all my teams that I work with, all the developers, everybody. Learn the business. Don't just be an order taker. Don't just do what's in the issue. But rather, I want you to help maybe improve the feature we're about to build. Maybe think from a business perspective. Ask a question. So to me, the domain model helps capture the business. It helps capture the right words to use, even for the classes. And then from an architecture point of view, I've done everything from simple web apps where I don't even draw the architecture because it just is, to super complex, highly fragmented systems that have to talk through message queues and all kinds of crazy stuff. So architecture, you can imagine on a real-time flight simulator, architecture is pretty important. But a web app, I don't think you have to think too hard about the model view controller or something like that, or maybe a single-page web app. But the other thing to do, and it's possible now, I always want to be able to push a button for deploy. Even back in 1995, we were building IBM's next generation manufacturing execution system, and my little consulting company was a major part of that. And even back in 95, I said, I need to be able to have a button somewhere that we can deploy. So this is critically important, and it's super easy to do. And if you have any problems, ask Ryan. Luckily, I don't work on anything as complex as probably most of you, kind of by choice, or certainly as, when they call Ryan in, it's already too late. But because I just like to get stuff delivered, I don't want it to be too hard. So my guiding principles, my process, how I kind of talk about this and define it, it works only because there's a so you're going to hear me say things about estimation, you'll hear me say odd things, but this all works because it's sort of a synergy of approaches that helps essentially start from a solid foundation. I try not to like somebody asked me, what would you do with a feature that was 13 points? And I said, that would never be on my stack. So I would never allow an extreme like that. So a lot of this will work only if you kind of understand the principles, the competing forces, and doing enough of it that all of it works. And I talk about technical debt. There's nothing wrong with technical debt if it's purposeful. I remember talking to, I think it was Charles Schwab, of selling some together UML products. They wanted a feature that I had been thinking about all along. I was like, oh, okay. Well, on the plane ride home, I thought of a hack. And I instructed the dev team, hey, we can get $1 million order if you get this hack. And they fought me about it. They said it's going against everything I've always told them. But I said, that's okay. And I immediately put in a ticket for the at the top of the stack for the next release to fix the hack. So, okay, I'm going to fix it, but I'm going to spend this technical debt now to get $1 million now versus do it right and wait. So, and I did that. They were happy, I was happy, and we had our first 7-figure sale, I think. So, what's the most important thing that you would consider necessary for any of your software projects? This is audience participation time. What's the most important thing to do a project? Oh, why? Whew, that's pretty meta. Okay, why? That's actually a really good one. Why are we doing this? Okay, what's the second most important thing? I never thought of that, but that is because that gets to the business. Why do you care? Why do you want this? Okay, well, how about we've decided to do the project? Quality, value. This is sort of a trick question. Oh, who said that? People. Yeah. It's okay, that's kind of stupid, I know, but it's also one of the most important things to remember. So let's say we got the people, we got the why, and we're starting to work. And most software projects might have a bunch of things required. Like I showed you the domain model. The IBM MES system probably had 300 domain classes, 7 major modules. So there's a lot of repetition. What does a good team, as they start working on something, recognizing what's in front of them, what do they often do next as they're working away and figuring things out? What's a common thing for teams to do? Another trick question. I won't let it go too long. Process. All right, so, hey, we've got, say, 10 major pieces of of the system to design and have a user interface. Let's build a process that allows us to work efficiently. And then people working with process and doing things that are maybe laborious and tedious will often invent something to help move more dirt. So what a people, process, and something that helps us do work. What do we often do next? Tools. So this, and I've used this for a long time, even when I was selling tools, because the tools are not the master. The people are the biggest problem, of course. But yeah, people, process, and tools. And it's in that order. And this is the hardest part. I want you to be thinking, right? And we need smart people to use their brains, not to just follow a process, not to just let a tool dictate what they do. Again, if you're beginning, that's a good start. It's just don't do it 10 times in a row. So another mantra I like to say is, does the word sneak up, does that mean something? Right? I'm not sure what the translation is, but sneak up on the problem. You don't have to build it all. Right? Building it, I like to say be lazy. The worst enemy towards building too much is usually me. It's hard to draw back, especially when you know someone for sure is going to want this. I had an example where I delivered a library for as just part of this like a side piece to this SaaS product that's used by pump manufacturers to create projects, collaborative workspace. And one of the customers said, "Hey, it would be really great to have some documents. Can you build a little library?" Sure. So it was a library with absolutely no categories. So in other words, it was like a flat list of documents. The stupidest library in the world. But who knows? We'll see if anybody uses it. And then they started using it. Then they're like, "Oh, this is so awesome." Because, it had the really brilliant feature like drag and drop from a folder. Boom, there goes all the documents. I'm good at inventing things like that. They said, "Well, we want to decommission this other system we have. Can we get categories, sections?" "Oh, sure." Of course, I'm pretty sure my actual model library probably had, "Yeah, we should have a library. It should probably have a group of nested sections. We should be able to have, all kinds of things that if you were to set out and build a library, you'd probably think to yourself of all kinds of features, because I could just make a career out of making this little library." But I held back and waited for the customer to start using it, waited for feedback. In other words, I got that feedback as quick as possible, put something out there as minimal as possible. Boom. It took off, and matter of fact, and then it started to suck and get slow because they just started slamming all kinds of documents, gigabytes worth of documents. So anyway, that's what I mean by be lazy, build the minimum, prove that you actually need it before you build it. And again, the business, right? That was letting the business drive this. That was quickly getting feedback. Be impatient. Don't be blocked. That means make a decision, do something. Don't just come ask a question. Just don't sit there paralyzed. After all, the only software that counts is if it's in production. That was one of the big things in my mind about the manifesto is I remember putting a card down called honesty, because many times in the past we would guide projects with Gantt charts. How far done are you? "Oh, I'm 90%. Can I use it yet? No. Sounds like a 0. So my trick is to make sure we get stuff in as soon as possible. So that's what you need to strive for. This needs to be another talk. But I'm not a big estimator unless I have to be an estimator. So I'll estimate, make a deadline, be a pain in the ass, be really rigid about the most minimal thing I need to build to get to a trade show for my client, for example. And I can show you all kinds of Jira charts and control charts and wonderful burn-up charts. But I don't like to do things that after a while provide no value. So always question your things that you do day in and day out if they're not providing value. I'll do sprints early on, but once I'm up and running, I just start doing it Kanban. I just start doing it, what are priorities. But sprints have another value, and in non-software projects, it might even imply more, because sprints, you might actually be trying to do certain things in that time frame to get certain higher level feedback. I'm just trying to churn out features, so I'm just saying there's no one right way. But I hate estimating. Oh, I don't hate estimating. I'll do it if I need to, and the way I get around it is to make all stories small. There is no 13-point story. There's not even a 3-point story on my stack. Now, it might be an epic with a bunch of things. I break everything down into small, bite-sized chunks. So that's my fake estimation. Now all I'm doing is, I'm going to zip through this, because that's a good one. A lot of times, our red lines would be flat. It's like, ooh, we suck. And we were just, after a while, we stopped, like, I kept joking about them. Like, yeah, we sucked again. Oh, look at that. We were even suckier. Sometimes they went up. So let's just stop doing that because it looks bad. Makes me feel bad about myself. So, now this one. I often say that 50 features, what we got to do, we think they're the 50 things we got to do. Again, my features aren't 1 and 13 and 1, and right? My features are all 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Maybe some 2s. Maybe some 1.5s. But anybody could, if you plotted that on a little wall or on a little graph and you saw, oh, look at that, we're doing about 10 per week and we got to do 50. Wonder when we're going to be done. That's as simple as I do it. And that actually gives you the ability to, so every time we finished a sprint and didn't finish the items in the sprint, guess where they went? To the top of the next sprint, right? We rarely reprioritized unless we had to. But my point is that was a lot of unnecessary ceremony. I just keep the list in the right order, churn through the list, and it's not hard to show the business where we're going and when we can go live. So meeting a deadline is the only time I really, really, really estimate and make sure my promise is going to be achievable. Then you really have to think about estimating. Or to start a project, a rough cost, things like that. So this is, I'll zip through some of these just because of the time. But I work on stuff as, either a sticky board, and then often I'll throw it into Jira. And I know people love to trash Jira. If you have to blame the tool, then you're doing it wrong. Because if the tools, now I have seen people horribly abuse Jira, but I've been using it since before it was version 1, I think. So to me, it's just some simple tool that lets me not have to be in the same room as the sticky notes. And as you can tell, I was fixing tests the other day. I'm big on modeling. I really do behavior-driven development, test-driven development. My world has been greatly enhanced with Cucumber, RSpec, Rails, Git, pull requests. I'm not good enough to do trunk-based development. I do it on one project, but I'll do typically feature topic branches. The ability to pump stuff up to a CI/CD system and get tests run, there's no excuse not to strive for being the best you can be. And that's my goal. So, in my opinion, the hardest thing about being agile is it's very personal. It's a practice. Like, does anybody here do yoga? There is no, I know somebody wanted to put it in the Olympics. It's like so anti-yoga, it's not even funny. In yoga, there is no master. It's a practice, right? If you haven't done it, there's goofy words they use. It's a lot of Sanskrit stuff, but my favorite is Shavasana. But it's a practice, and so is what we do. It is not easy to constantly have to challenge yourself to get better and better. It's very individual. So thank you very much, and I'll be here all day to answer any questions. Thank you.